Hey, just want to say thank you for coming out tonight here at 305 Oliver Street. And for those who are joining us live online, thank you for taking a couple of minutes this evening to spend some time with us and get to know Tyler and Sarah. This past week, I had breakfast with Nate Ross, who's the lead pastor at Northside over in New Albany. And he's only been doing that for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe just a tad longer. But we were talking about that. Tyler was sitting there with me, and he'd been on staff for probably 5 or 6 years prior to being named the next lead pastor there. And he said it was surprising, even though he was his dad was the senior pastor there, and even though he'd been on staff for 5 or 6 plus years there were lots of people that didn't know him. So we want to make sure that you guys have the chance to get to know Tyler and Sarah this evening. We don't want to assume that anybody in this room or anybody that's watching us online already knows him. So we want to take a few minutes this evening and introduce him and talk with him and allow you guys to ask questions. So for those of you who are here in the building, you'll see that on some of the seats there's a note card and a pen. If you have questions that you want to ask Tyler or Sarah, we'd love for you to write those down. Please take a moment to put your name on there also, because just in case we don't get a chance to get to all of the questions this evening, we want to make sure that we get you an answer to your question, whether we get a chance to read it tonight or not. So you can start writing those at any point, and when you have a card, just raise it up in the air, and Donnie is sitting in the back, and he's going to come and grab that, and he'll cross out the stuff that he doesn't want us to hear and add something really nice in. I don't know what he'll do with them, but you guys go ahead and do that. So before we get started, let me just take a moment and pray. Father, we thank you for being a God who knows us and a God who loves us. This evening, we have come together to talk about First Capital, to talk about her future, and to listen to you. So, Father, we ask that you be present during this time together this evening. We ask that you would help us to listen to you. We ask that you would help us to have in mind what is best for First Capital and where you want her to go. So, Father, I ask that blessing on us this evening. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen. So I just kind of wanted to go back a little bit. So some of this succession talk that started this year might have seemed to be kind of fast and quick for you guys. But I need you to know that I came here in 1st of November in 2016. And at my interview, one of the things that the shepherds told me is that they said was, we're looking for someone in this role because Randy's getting old. They actually said that. I don't know if you remember that, Randy. Randy's getting old, and we need him to stay at least 5 more years. So that was 5 years ago. So somehow or another, I've helped him make it 5 more years. Or maybe I've just made it 5 bad years for him. I'm not really sure which. But 5 years ago, there was already talk about succession. Randy has been here for almost 20 years. And when he came, his goal was to have First Capital Christian Church be a healthy church. And he's worked really hard at making that happen along with many of you. I believe that's been able to happen. So 5 years ago, when I came on board, I started helping him with that. Probably 4 years ago, maybe 3.5, we actually started talking about succession a little more vocally at that point. You guys may or may not realize it, but we had a candidate on staff who had expressed some interest in following Randy. And we spent some time working with him, helping him. He ended up, this is maybe going to be a surprise to you, he ended up deciding to plant a church in Iowa instead. So he moved on. And from that point, we have interviewed someone in Springfield, Illinois. We interviewed someone from Louisville, Kentucky. We've gone through a variety of other possibilities as well as Tyler. So I want you to hear that this has been going on for a while. We've been talking about it for quite a while, and we have looked at a lot of different people in this process. So that brings us here to tonight. We're going to have Chad come up here in just a minute representing the shepherds, and he's going to kind of talk through how they came to this particular decision. But before he comes, I just want you to know that at this point, Tyler's a candidate for the lead minister role here at First Capital. That decision has not been made. That decision is in not only the shepherd's hands, but also your hands as members here. According to our bylaws, there has to be a congregational vote for this position, and that will happen January 9th. It will happen after the 9 o'clock service and after the 10:45 service. We'll probably also be voting on the budget at that same time. I think those are the two pieces. And according to the bylaws, that's really about the only things that the members get a chance to vote on. Budgets, the lead minister, and also any new shepherds. But at this point, we don't have new shepherds that we're going to be presenting. So I wanted you to know that's what's coming up over the next 2 months. Our goal is for not only this to happen, but for you guys to have a chance to get to know Tyler more over the next month or so. Not exactly sure how that's going to play out and what form that takes, but we want to make sure that happens. So I wanted to give you guys that kind of an opening. I want to pass the microphone on to Chad. He's going to talk about the shepherds and their decision that brings us to tonight.
All right, thank you. He said we're not getting any new shepherds after I fall off this stage for speaking in public. We might have to. My name is Chad Taylor, and I'm one of 7 shepherds here. Some of those are up here in this motley crew, but and I'm going to talk to you tonight about shepherd support and some of the process of this decision that we went through. And some of you may not know as how we operate as shepherds is we do a consensus. There is no voting on a decision. So all support it or it doesn't happen, okay? It's not a 3 to 4 vote or anything like that. And that happens too with the vote on, or not the vote, but the decision making on bringing like the next lead pastor in, candidate for that. So consensus happens on that too. And another part of this process was we needed to define what the core values of First Capital are. And you've heard a little bit about that. There's 3 of those. One is deeply care about people. We valued redemption, and we're always on mission. And part of the reason we needed to define that is because whoever we bring in needs to be able to embrace those, and also that gives them something that tells them who we are. They need to embody that. We also believe the candidate needs to be competent, have moral character, and be cohesive with First Capital and its staff. The leadership model was another factor that plays a role in our selection. First Capital has transitioned into a multi-minister leadership model. That's happened over the years. You know, it was kind of just Randy in that role, and then eventually Ed and Tyler both came along in that. This will be a leader shift that gradually moves Tyler into that lead role, with Randy becoming a little less, Ed's still there supporting all along the way. But in closing, I want to put out there that we believe First Capital is a body of believers that's helping all that we can to find and follow Jesus. We don't let traditions or comforts stand in our way. We don't let them trump our core values for kingdom advancement. In this process, several candidates have been vetted with all those the things I mentioned in mind. And through prayer and discernment, we have put before you Tyler Sansom as the candidate for lead pastor. Thank you.
So, Randy, go ahead and have a seat up here. He got up at 3 o'clock this morning, so he might be not quite as sharp as normal, or sharper than normal. We'll see in a little while. So the process this evening is we're going to have Tyler come up first, I believe, and Randy's got some questions, and hopefully you guys are working on some questions there. So we'll work our way through those, kind of an interview style. So Tyler, why don't you come on up and go ahead and ask him some questions.
It's good to see you guys, and I wasn't here this morning. We were flying back, but I felt like this morning as I was watching you online that God was in this place, and that we had just a wonderful experience. And let me tell you how cool it feels to be in my seat, and then when I'm not here, know that it's just, it really goes super well. Do you know how good? It's just it stirs my soul to know that you leave things and you leave it in good hands. So that little piece out of the way, I've got a bunch of questions ready to ask Tyler, but the more important questions may be the ones that you have. And so if you have questions, if you're watching online and you would just want to type in your questions, Megan's sitting over here and she's going to take those and get them to us. Or if you're sitting out here and you have questions, we'd like to know what they are. But I've got some, and I'm going to start with some that he doesn't know are coming, because that's kind of fun. But I want to start just with this, and that is, Tyler, there may be people in this room that really don't know you like we think they do. So just walk us back real quickly in just a minute or two through your life story, and hit on the 3 or 4 really big pieces of your story that affect bringing you to this spot.
Yeah. So I was born in Huntington, West Virginia. I grew up my whole life in West Virginia all the way through college. And I did not remember this part of the story, but we had dinner with my aunt and uncle a few weeks ago when they came up. And my uncle reminded me of how I told him I had accepted Jesus. And I didn't remember that part. I remembered being baptized. I remember when it was. But I was belting out on a karaoke machine when I was 6 years old, Amazing Grace. And somehow in that moment, I had decided I'm going to give my life to Jesus. My uncle was mowing the grass, though, down the hill, and he just heard me just screaming out Amazing Grace. And then he got to have the conversation with what that meant, which was really cool. And he remembers that like it was really vivid. But I got baptized when I was 6 years old. One of those deals where I had always grown up in the church, but I didn't necessarily make my faith my own until I got to college. My whole life I had really, really pursued playing sports. And when I got to college, I quickly was injured and couldn't play sports any longer. And that was a rock your world kind of moment. So I transferred to a different school to get a fresh start. And the coach at the school was instrumental in not only mentoring me in my faith, but helping me decide to pursue ministry. And then shortly after that, I got a call from you in Corydon, Indiana, and the rest is history.
Well, not quite the rest.
No.
So now, take us through 9 years here with us, and walk through some of the roles you've played. And
Yeah, so I started here when I was about to turn 20. So I looked a lot different than I do now, much younger. And I was the worship leader on stage here, but also with the youth in Quest. Now, at that point, Quest was only Wednesday night, so we had middle school and high school. So it was like mass chaos every Wednesday, and it was awesome. So I got to build up a group of worshipers that are still, some of them are still around today on the worship team. You get to see them singing on stage. So I led worship here for a couple of years, and then Sarah and I decided that our next move that God wanted us to do was to leave here and go to her hometown in Indianapolis and lead worship for a church called Northview. And let's see, 5 months, was it maybe 5 months later, I called you and said, man, I think I made a mistake. I'm not sure I'm even supposed to do worship ministry anymore. I heard you have a children's ministry opening, and you said there is no chance in the actual world that you're going to be the children's minister. If you guys have ever seen me with kids, you will immediately know why. And I said, that's fine. I get it. You guys have Matt now. I know it's going really well. But I kept calling you back. And fortunately, you guys gave me a chance to come back. And I think we called it the creative arts position, but it was really the church potluck version of a job. It was just whatever we could find for me to do that would equate to 40 hours of work. And that's when I brought you the idea for Church Anywhere. Yeah. And almost immediately online took off, microsites took off. We got to see a lot of life change. And so I transitioned into a role that was primarily focused on expanding that ministry. Yeah. And then probably 5 years ago, I threw you for a loop and said I'd like to start preaching, because when I first got here, I wanted nothing at all to do with talking in front of people, more than Chad. I wanted less than Chad to talk in front of people. But I really felt like as we left Northview that God had placed on my heart a different kind of leadership role, and I knew that would have to include some kind of communication. So about 5 years ago, you gave me the opportunity to preach. It was terrible, but I feel like you've helped me along the way in that. So
okay, let's go back here. Hurt my feelings. You decided to leave. So why did you leave, and why did you come back?
Those are hard questions. They really are. The coming back one's easier than the leaving one, because I think it's painful for me to think through that and the real reasons why. To be honest, I was a 22-year-old kid who had the opportunity to lead worship in front of 20,000+ people. Just to be real with you guys, that's a hard opportunity to pass up, especially when you have a natural personality that swings towards wanting that kind of platform. So I got there, and like they say, the grass isn't always greener on that side. And so I quickly realized that maybe God had a different use for me besides just singing in front of people. But that was a hard lesson to learn. And so the reason I wanted to come back was I wanted to be really hands-on with, we didn't have this phrase then, but for helping people find and follow Jesus. I really wanted to be in the thick of it, and I just wasn't doing that there.
Okay. All right, I have a question here that it's really simple, and yet it's really profound. Why do you want to do this? It's a great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Some of you guys don't know this, but this has been one of those deals where I told you guys no to doing this twice. So over the last 2.5 years, I've said, no, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to do. No, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to do. And God kept being like, okay, you didn't really listen to me when you went to Northview, so maybe you should start listening to me. And everything kept pointing back. In prayer and discussions with Sarah, we just kept coming back to the Holy Spirit, leading us to pursue this. So I want to do that because I love you guys, and I want to lead this community and lead this church. But in the other side of that, I really feel passionate that is what God is wanting us to do as well.
All right. Nobody gave me any more questions, so I'm going to go another one of mine. You say you love these guys, but what we've seen you do is love people that aren't here. The Church Anywhere thing is really what we've seen out of you. So what I need you to do right now is I need to know if you get this position, does just Church Anywhere take off and become even more than it ever was before, and we leave these guys in the dirt? I don't know how to say that any other way. Or how does this play out? How does Church Anywhere and those that gather here, how does that play out?
Yeah, so who I've been through my entire life has been if I am doing something, if I'm tasked with doing something, if you would have told me when I'm coming back from Northview, we need you to be the custodian, I would have given 1,000% effort and been ultra passionate about being the best custodian I could possibly be. So for the last few years, I'm thankful that this has been the case, but my job has been to do church anywhere. And so I've given my entire life's effort to making that the best ministry possible. With that being said, though, when I transition into this role, I will give that same effort for the whole church. Fortunately, we've got a really good team with Church Anywhere. Megan over here is instrumental in that. Patrick is on the team. Tammy, Evie, like we've got some really good players on that team that I'm confident will take that mantle from me and run with it while I focus on making First Capital Christian Church as a whole, including Church Anywhere, the best it possibly can be.
I don't know if that answered some of the questions that I've got in my hand right now or not. I'm looking and I see some nods. So I think you just hit some of these. So now let's go to the next one. Ready?
Okay.
What team would you like to play for in the NFL, and why is it the Cowboys?
Man, doesn't leave me a lot of room for margin right there. It would not be the Cowboys. So it would either be the Patriots or the Browns.
Yeah, I know what you think of the Browns.
Yeah, 10 people just left, I think.
All right, let's look through here. Those were the ones that were just there. Oh, boy. I didn't realize we were going to be in the hot
I feel like
seat.
I'm on a game show or something.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Ready? In the past, Randy has chosen not to bring hot topics or politics to the pulpit. Abortion, Black Lives Matter, for example. How do you intend to approach those things?
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially based on the climate of the last 2 years of being here. The good thing about the way that our leadership is structured is that very rarely is someone making a unilateral decision. There's a meeting every Monday morning. That's the very first thing we do, where the leadership team meets. So all throughout the 2020, what seemed like chaos at every corner, we had long discussions about how do we approach certain subject matters. You name it, they came up in those meetings. And I got to learn from people like Randy and people like Ed on even if you're passionate about a certain subject, or if you feel strongly about one way, there's always different paths. When you taught me how to write sermons, you always said that there are 3 paths that you need to have at the beginning. Like, your first path might not be the right answer. I think that can apply into these situations as well. So maybe if your first instinct is to like spout off and say something from the pulpit, there's probably wiser people that need to speak into that can get you to those other paths, and collectively as a group, you can come out with the best way to approach those subjects as a church. Okay. That was a really hard question to come up with on the spot. Just whoever wrote that, good job.
All right, let's see if I can give you another hard one. Ready? What's your favorite book of the Bible and why?
I love reading anything that has to do with history. So like 1st and 2nd Samuel is probably my favorite to just sit down and read. Yeah. But probably my favorite one to study is Ephesians.
Ephesians to study, 1st, 2nd Samuel to read.
Yeah, if I'm just sitting down and want a good story, gotcha. There's a lot of them in there.
Okay, so now what's your favorite scripture?
That's a good one. It's probably the one I preached on a couple weeks ago, which is always be prepared to give an account for the hope that you have in Christ.
I thought for sure it was John 5.
Oh my goodness, get out of here. Yeah, that's a running joke. In the last 5 years, I've probably preached or done some form of devotional video on John chapter 5 like 15 times. So like you'll never hear another sermon on that again, probably.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to go back to another one of mine.
Okay.
I'm old, you're not. Okay? But we pretty much span the gap between us. So my question is, how can a young guy like you effectively minister to all age groups? We've got boomers and millennials and we've got Gen X, and we've got Gen Z, and we got Gen A. I guess it's A coming up, right? So how can you effectively do all of it? And let me just stop and say, part of what's played into this whole thing for me is, while I love what I'm doing, I don't think that I'm the right person to speak to those that are 30 and younger. I think I have lost that because of my age. And I don't think that generation is quick to receive words from boomers. And that plays into this whole thing. And so now I'm asking you as a 28-year-old, but I know someday you'll be 29 if the Lord allows. But how do you reach all generations with that?
So I knew this question was coming. I'm going to preface that with this. I got the opportunity to be involved in a mentorship group led by an author that you and I have both read. It was a really cool opportunity. It lined up with hopefully this transition happening. So it was one of those deals where we had to make that happen if all possible. So for the next year, me and 11 other pastors across the country are being mentored by this really good author. And every month, one of us gets to be on the hot seat in these meetings. And I was on the hot seat this month, which was Wednesday of this week. And so I was like, man, this is a great opportunity to let other people speak into some of these questions that I know are going to be coming. And that's the one I started with, was how do you lead a multi-generation church? And their advice was priceless. But the best piece of advice they gave me was to build relationships with leaders within every generation. So there's no possible way anyone can effectively lead every generation by themselves. But if they can develop relationships with leaders from every respective generation, that's how multiplication happens. And that's how you can effectively lead. You can listen to what those people have to say, and not in a sense of I'm listening so I can manipulate, but I'm listening so I can learn from a different perspective. And I think that's how I will continue to approach that. Some of you guys have worked with me in this room, and you're 40 years older than me or 10 years younger than me. And I hope that we've been able to learn a little bit from each other in that way.
Okay. Several have asked kind of the same question, but we have identified this role, this lead role, as being a visionary. And being a visionary is somebody who can and has that capacity to see down the road, anticipate. And so when you look down the road, when you vision here, I'm going to change it into my own language now. When you look down to 2030, who do you see us being? How do you see the church universal evolving? I mean, there's a lot of places you can take that question. But talk to me about this vision piece.
Yeah, I think that you've all seen the church change rapidly over your lifetime. The church as a whole, Big C Church. And I think we've seen an accelerated version of that in the last couple of years. We've seen, you can look on a Sunday morning and not everyone is back that we had pre-COVID. And we want them all to be back. But the reality of the situation is we're going to go with the people who are here that want to go with us. Chad mentioned the core values earlier. And I was instrumental in helping come up with those. And I really, truly see us becoming a church that really deeply cares about people. So I'll give you guys a little hint of what's coming. But in 2020, we've already identified that we're going to adopt the Corden school system. So like we're, as a church, we're going to deeply care about our community, the teachers, the parents, the people that work there that don't ever get recognition, like cafeteria workers, things like that, and the students. So we're going to deeply care about them on a big macro level, but we're going to figure out ways to outfit you guys to care about each other as well, whether that's connection events, whether that's getting teams to go into hospitals to visit people, whatever that is. We're going to be the church in Harrison County that everybody knows cares about people. And then we're going to care about redemption. We're going to continue to have more baptisms like we saw this morning. in the room here, and we're going to continue to see that in jails and prisons and in nursing homes and places like that. We're going to be the church in Harrison County that everybody knows helps people find Jesus. And on the flip side of that, I think the key to this whole thing is making sure that we're on mission. Church no longer needs to be a place where people just come and consume. It needs to be a place where we activate you guys to go out into the community and make the gospel irresistible. That's what made it so irresistible at the beginning, is that people lived the way Jesus wanted them to live. And there was no reason for reproach in that. People in community saw the way they were living and were so attracted to that they became attracted to Jesus. And that's who I see us becoming.
So what I just heard was
the one clap.
The one clap. Yeah, the one clap. Now, what I just heard was that it doesn't focus on methods. It focuses on the concepts that lay under those, and you create the methods.
Yeah,
to
you
carry
create the methods to empower the people.
Right. Yeah. All right. Now, as a pastor, what drains you and what energizes you?
That might be a better question for my wife, actually. But
All right, come on up, Sarah.
this was planned, by the way. She knew she was coming.
Oh, yeah, this was planned.
Let me grab you a mic, Sarah.
No, he'll just throw them down there.
My Energizer Bunny spirit would tell you, just go, go, go all the time. So I would love to hear her perspective on this.
Okay. So, Sarah, first of all, in case you don't know, why don't you introduce Sarah and tell them just a little bit about her?
Yes, so this is my wife, Sarah. We've been married for, we're going on 8 years now. So we're like super old. And we met on a blind date, and we got married 7 months later back in the day. And it's been the best decision I've ever made. So that's all I got. She's a professional photographer. When I met her, she was a scientist, and now she takes pictures. So.
Yep.
All right, now, what in ministry, what energizes him and what drains him?
This is really hard because we all know Tyler is an energizer bunny, and I know people always want me to say, is he going too fast? Like, is he not pacing himself? But he's just, it's unbelievable, really, your pace. And selfishly, when we first got married, I tried to keep up with you, and I am not that way. So that's been a nice learning curve for us. But honestly, I've seen you learn how to pace yourself. I think just seeing people that you've poured into, now pouring into other people, really fills you and energizes you. Like, I know you talk to your Church Anywhere leaders, like you message them the night that they went into prison or whatever to see how it went, and just to hear them, you're always so excited. So I think that part, seeing that, just that chain reaction of pouring into people and becoming disciples and growing deeper in Christ really energizes you and drains you.
It's got to be one of the things that drains me most, and this is going to shock you guys, but it's leading worship. I get absolutely drained. I will fall asleep immediately after the service and not wake up what it seems like till a month later. So.
And it's really sad for me because I love it when he does. I get so excited, and then afterwards he's like,
yeah. Also meetings. Meetings drain me. But I love what I do. It's really hard to think. Like, I could not possibly pick another profession that I would love more than what I get to do. But to echo what she was saying, I'm just going to really briefly. Megan got to speak at the International Conference on Missions a couple days ago, which for those of you who know Megan is like the most out of the comfort zone kind of thing that she could possibly do. To speak in front of like 1,000+ people in a room is like the stuff of nightmares for her. But I've seen her in the last 2 years go from like over here, completely introverted, doing her own thing, to leading others. And then now on a national scale, leading other churches. And man, things like that, like seeing growth in people and being even a small part of it, that's what fills me up.
Yeah, I think she texted you or called you or told you that we were going to Poland next year. Is that right?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. When she finished her presentation before the large crowd, Saturday morning. She came off the stage, and a guy caught her and said, "I've got the World Convention next year in Warsaw, and we'd like you to come and speak."
Yeah, right before that text, though, she also said that if she passes out, that you should tell them she's been slain in the spirit. So she's a little nervous.
So I would say she did well, wouldn't you? Yeah, it was really, really powerful.
That was not to deflect that question, but that's the kind of thing that really fills me up.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. All right. This is an interesting question. Well, I'm glad that I get to read these and don't have to answer them. We've seen you in your ministry here move from project to project, always looking for the next thing. So what's going to make you think that you don't want to stay in, that you're going to get bored here? And what's next after the leadership role then?
It's a great question. I have moved from project to project and implemented leaders beneath me, which is a very different thing from moving to project and letting the project flounder afterwards. I think being a good leader is figuring out ways to multiply yourself, and then if you are able to step away and start something new, then it still continues to be successful. I think that's a great principle for all of us to have. So I can see on the outside where that would look like. I'm just bouncing everywhere. But at the same time, there's been intentionality of building people like Megan up, building people like Ty up, and Evan, who's in the crowd, to where I'm confident that if I would ever step away from a specific project, that they could take it and run with it, then I can just continue to oversee all of the projects that are happening.
How do you see family ministry moving forward? And just talking about parents and kids and our kids' ministry, and speak into that.
Yeah, I think that this next generation is vital to the health of the church, especially in our culture today. We're starting to see less and less church attendance. I saw a stat, I haven't even shared this with you yet, but church attendance now once every 8 weeks. That's what is considered regular attendance. So once every 2 months, which is crazy because just like 10 years ago, it was once every 2 weeks. So on a national scale, people are coming to church less and less. So therefore, we have to figure out ways as a family ministry team to empower the parents to really, really pastor their children. It can no longer just be on a 1 hour service on the weekends to fill up the kids. We've got to figure out ways to partner with the parents, partner with the communities, to empower them to also expand upon the 1 hour that we get them on the weekends, especially with the scarcity of attendance in today's culture.
Another hard one. If you had 3 do-overs, if you could go back and say, "Oh, I wish I could redo that." I don't know if you can come up with 3 or not, but talk to me about do-overs.
Yeah, I knew this question was coming, so I've had some time to think about it. We've talked about this a ton. I think that one of them was hit on earlier. I think earlier on in my ministry, I wish I would have been less reactionary and quicker to learn from people who are wiser than I am. I think that being slower to respond to certain things over the last 9 years would have done me well, whether that's an individual conversation with someone or whether that's saying something from the stage or on social media or whatever. So one of the do-overs would be multiple do-overs. It would be learning earlier on to lean on wise counsel. Probably a second one would be to Sarah and I have been really intentional about creating margin within our lives, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. I wish I would have, I could intellectually get there 9 years ago and figure out logically why I should create margin. I couldn't put that in practice yet. So earlier on, I wish I would have figured out how to practically create more margin in our lives, whether that's time or finances or whatever the situation was. I wish I'd have learned that earlier on because there would have been less hardships. the third one was the one that we were having the hardest time figuring out. I'm sure there's probably 50 do-overs, 50 plus do-overs that all revolve around like how I would have handled one specific situation with a person, or if I would have been there for one person being in the hospital when I wasn't. But there was an article that came out a couple weeks ago that Randy and I both read, where the person suggested there are 3 types of people. There's a wise person who makes a mistake and then he learns from it and he doesn't make that mistake again. There's a foolish person who makes a mistake and then continues to make that same mistake over and over and over. And then there's an evil person who makes a mistake with the intention of causing chaos. I try my best to be that wise person. So there's probably a bunch of do-overs, but I hope that there's not a bunch of redo-overs. So where I've learned from that mistake and then continue and try to not make that same mistake again.
All right, let me give him a little break, and that means I'm gonna. Sarah, you've thought about this, but how does his taking this role affect you?
I think it's funny because multiple times in the last few weekends, people have said, "Oh, you're going to be a pastor's wife." And I'm like, yes, but I already have been for years. And it's not like he's not involved or that I guess I could hide, but I like to be a partner in his ministry. So I think it'll probably put maybe me more under that microscope, maybe a little bit more of that pressure on me, but I would like to think I'm just going to keep doing what we've always done, where we are partners, and I will be here for as much. Like, I know there will be things that I do not need to be involved in, but I want to be your partner for everything.
Yeah. For those of you who've worked with us, that rings true. We're basically like attached at the hip when it comes to ministry. So I lucked out on that one with the best wife for ministry possible.
Okay, how would you encourage connection between each ministry? In other words, how can you make the ministries here work together?
Man, I love this question because this has been my kick for like 3 years that I've been trying to articulate the response. I don't want to give all of this away because, spoilers, January 2nd and January 9th, we're actually going to lay this out in front of you guys. But man, my goal is to be one unified unit moving forward. And it really looks like all of our ministries coming together with one common goal, and then figuring out ways that we can partner together to outfit you guys, like I was talking about earlier, to go out into the community and then share Jesus with everybody in our community. That's as much as I'm going to spoil that. But just come January 2nd and January 9th, because I'm really, really excited about it. Also, if you just go in room 106, all of it's on a whiteboard. So.
Well, if that's not a spoiler alert.
but don't do that.
Sarah, what do you see in Tyler as your helpmate and as a spouse that gives you some idea of how he will approach this role with the church?
Yes. I got really lucky, and I have the best husband in the world, and I know nobody's going to believe that because I have to say that because I'm his wife. But Tyler's just always been a leader. He's always been, what you see is what you get. Like, the version I get of Tyler is not different than the version you get, other than he likes to hug me, and that's good.
I'm really working on the hugs.
Yeah.
As soon as they announced this candidacy, I've hugged more people than in the last 9 years combined. So, working on it.
But he's the same always, so it's not like you have to worry about him being, I don't know if you worry about that, but being different behind closed doors, because he's not. And I've always really appreciated that about you. But just leading me always to be a better follower of Christ, just in our household, like serving, pushing me to do things out of my comfort zone when I really didn't want to. Leading our finances, like I didn't even know I needed that when we first started dating, but just to have that peace. So I just know that you're going to continue to grow in those areas and learning from people and always seeking wise counsel. And I trust you with my life, and I know that you are going to serve them well.
Spoken like a true, loving wife. Let's go here. Let's go here. We exist to help people find and follow Jesus. You probably have heard us say that before.
Just a couple times.
So do you lean toward the find or do you lean toward the follow?
Man, that is also a question I knew was coming, and I've probably wrestled with that question as much or more than any of the other questions. I'm gonna give you guys two answers, okay? Personally, I think I lean towards find. I love getting to share Jesus with people. Like this morning I got to baptize Casey, and we basically met Casey on her engagement shoot. And I've loved getting to share who Jesus is beyond that. Philosophically, I think I lean towards the follow side. So I love the idea and the practice and seeing it play out of creating better followers of Jesus, better disciples, who then get to share my passion of helping people find Jesus. So I think the byproduct of having people become better followers is more people finding. I hope that makes sense. So I think I lean naturally, personality-wise, towards find. Philosophically, in ministry, I think I would push more towards follow.
Understanding there'll be a congregational vote that will decide this, would you give up rooting for the Patriots to get my vote?
Who wrote that question?
Actually,
I've been trying for 8 years, you guys. 8 years.
that's not the way it's written, but I thought it was better that way.
Oh, man, I will plead the fifth on that one.
All right, said just kidding. Seriously, though, can you identify some new ministries that you would like to see?
Yeah, it's been an interesting last several days. Ed and I have had a lot of conversations, and we both got to meet with Nate Ross down at Northside. Nate was a leader for the Spire Conference, which was in Nashville. It was a big conference for a lot of pastors. And he and I got to hook up there, which was the first time we had ever met, which is hilarious because that's in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're like 15 minutes down the road from each other here. But we hit it off there, so we met up for breakfast last Thursday. And we kicked around the idea of what would it look like to figure out ways to empower the boomer plus generation. And he gave me a stat that I didn't know, but it made sense. The boomers are the third richest people group in the world, including nations. So there's like United States, China, boomers, and then other nations. They're also the second largest group of people on the face of the earth, and they're the people that need to feel like they have a purpose while going into retirement. And I want to figure out a way for that group of people specifically as a new ministry, for them to not feel like they've been forgotten, but that they have a purpose and that they can pour into younger generations, and they can go out and, like I said, be empowered to go in the community. So that's one of them. I really, really want to see our men's ministry start to thrive. The women's ministry has had a champion for about a year, and she is just like knocking it out of the park right now. And just last week, we identified and the person accepted becoming the leader of the men's ministry. So I'm excited to see our staff pour into him and to see what he can do with the men. And then I would love to see how those men and women ministry affect the marriages at the church.
I think this is a really interesting question because you and I are enough alike that I know that our tendency is to pour into those who we see this enormous potential. But how do you not overlook those in the seats who are struggling?
You hired Donnie. That's a cop-out answer. I'm just kidding. That is something that's an area that I will have to continue to grow in, that I've grown in since I was 19. I hope when I'm 38, I can look back and say, man, from 28 to 38, I grew in the area of caring about people that are hurting. But I think there's got to be intentionality. One of the sermon series we did a few years ago was called Dancing with the Scars. And I still have people, well, Tammy is in the audience right now, and she's on our staff now, and she came up for the very first time to a bell that was over there in the corner during one of those sermons, and it was such a moment for her that she still thinks back onto that because she was a broken, hurting person. And so we have to continue to be intentional about giving people opportunities to make those types of decisions, types of life moments, very similar to how Patrick did today from the stage. So we've got to figure out ways to do that individually, but also corporately within our services and our worship opportunities.
Good. Okay, this one I'm going to ask both of you. I'm going to ask you, and then I want to ask you to verify. Ready?
This is about the Patriots again. I don't know, man.
No. Do you consider yourself financially tight?
Financially tight? No, I consider myself really good with finances, but I'm not super, super tight.
Yeah, no, that is true. He's the guy that looks forward to doing taxes and is like ready for January 1st to come so that he can start getting that together, and always been responsible with it. But he's also the first person you will always text me and say, hey, I'm giving to this because they need it. And I say, okay.
Yeah, I really want to have an open hand and be generous. This is just in our personal lives. I don't know if you're asking me about beyond that, but I would consider myself always 1,000% on top of our finances to a point where I could, like right now, tell you what's in every account that we have and how much is allocated to spend in that per month. But I never want to get to the point where I'm holding on to my money that could be used to help other people. And I'd say that as genuinely and as transparently as possible to you guys.
I'm going to insert something here that I don't have permission to do, but that's all right.
But you have a mic. So.
But I have a microphone. When Tyler left us, and I still haven't gotten over that, when Tyler left us and went to a mega church in Indianapolis and then came back to us, he agreed, it was his suggestion and his proposal to come back at the salary at which he had begun with us when he was 19 and single. Now, one, that's how badly he wanted to come back here. Okay? But let me translate that another way for you. He willingly took a $40,000 pay cut to come back here. And I said, how can you live on that? And he said, I did it before. And he did. He managed it. He worked it out. Now, the advantage he had this time is he had married someone who could also help out with that. But that's a story that very few people knew, that you probably need to know if you're going to consider the heart of the man that we're talking about putting in this position. All right, let's change. Let's go another place. Let's go to the heart of the man. How do you handle your faith when fear comes?
They're not going to believe this when I tell them this. Can you think of a time that I've been afraid in our entire marriage?
I just really can't.
I don't know why. It's probably a personality thing. Ed and I had this discussion. This was about high school sports. But there's these types of players that some of them are really good in practice, but when it comes to game day, they're like terrified, so they don't perform the same way they do in practice. And then there's those types of players that it doesn't matter what the scenario is, their personality is, I'm the best guy on the field, and if you're lining up against me, I'm going to beat you. For whatever reason, that is the way that God wired me, and I try to keep that in check. But I very rarely have a situation where I don't just say, okay, God, you've put me here, let's make it happen. That's why we're about to be 29-year-old grandparents. That's why we took a $40,000 pay cut to come here. That's just who we are.
Time out. We probably need an explanation there for people that don't know the background of that.
Yeah, I think it was on our first date that I told you that I can't have kids, which is a bold move, guys, bold move. And so we knew going into our entire marriage that our own kids, unless it was a miracle, wasn't going to happen. And the other side of that is we didn't really want kids. Like we really like spending time together. We really like being able to pour into our ministry. But we started serving at one of the Church Anywhere locations at Open Doors, which is a youth shelter for kids who are either in the foster care system or have been taken out of their house by the foster care system. And one night, I specifically remember we were in the Jeep because it broke down about 15 times right after this conversation happened. But we both looked at each other and said, I feel like God's telling us to foster Leanne. Which was an odd thing for both of us to be thinking, like almost at the exact same time. So we brought her into our house, and then we both felt like God was leading us to adopt her. We don't know the first thing about being parents, especially parents to a 17-year-old who had been through 17 homes. But in that scenario, we were not going to let what seems on the outside as a crazy decision move us away from what we felt like God was calling us to do. And it's been really a challenge. Like, we don't know anything about parenting, but we're going to do our very best to continue to love her the best way that we know how. And now we're going to be grandparents, which was not in my high school, this is what's going to happen before 30 list. That wasn't in there, but we're not afraid. We're just going to roll with it and let the Holy Spirit continue to lead us in that.
This is probably on several people's minds, just hasn't been asked yet. With your new responsibilities as the lead pastor, how does that impact your role with First Capital Films? And will the church continue to make films as an outreach ministry?
I will. First of all, the Father's Fight was the movie that was chosen for the International Conference on Missions. So that was really cool that Randy and Megan got to speak there, and they also got to show a Father's Fight. I don't know how the exact number is, but we've roughly 20,000+ people have viewed that movie in its entirety, whether that's in theaters, on Amazon, or in the jails and prisons. We've seen a ton of life change from that as well. People are consuming content in a crazy rate in today's world, like 8+ hours a day of some form of content, like on their cell phones or on their TVs. And we want to be on those screens. If that's where people are, we want to share Jesus with those people. So I don't have any plans of not continuing to make First Capital Films. What I do have plans to do, though, is to continue to pour into my team, who are awesome. I can't express how awesome this team is. That we just met as a producers team last week, and every one of those guys in there are just absolute All-Americans. And so I'm going to continue to pour into them, so where I can step back a little bit, they can take the mantle and run, which goes into the question you guys asked earlier about bouncing from ministry to ministry. It's the same philosophy. Continue to pour into people, and you don't have to be quite as hands-on. You can still be a part of it as an overseer, but then you let those people you've poured into run with it. I see that as where First Capital Films will eventually go.
Another question coming back to Find and Follow. And how will you get people to go deeper into their faith?
A very practical way, shameless plug, is that myself and Eric Pavey are going to be teaching a Bible survey class where we're going to look at the scripture through the eyes of seeing Jesus in all the parts of the Bible. So that's a very practical way that starts in January. One of the other ways that we're going to do that is really, really be intentional about helping people take one step closer to Jesus every day. We've already seen that start to happen. I know Patrick's working on a mentorship training program where we can, like I said, with some of the older generation, we can get them to start mentoring some of the younger generation. So there are things that are in place in the works right now that are going to help us tremendously in that aspect. But because philosophically I believe that the byproduct of follow is helping people find, I could see myself pushing more towards that side with ministry structure and ideas for ministry. That way that the find side also benefits from that, but we get to see more baptizers instead of baptisms like scheduled in a service or something like that.
We've been around this one, but I just want to give it, here we are. And where do you think you will be in 5 years?
Oh, if you guys vote me in, then there's no chance in the world that I'm not here in 5 years. This is not like some kind of 1 or 2 year commitment. To be totally transparent with you guys, that's the hardest part about this decision for us. To be 28 years old and know that we're committing the next 10+ years of our lives. But that's how serious we're taking this commitment. So that's why we've prayed over it for a year and a half. That's why we've really thought this through. It's not a one and done kind of deal. This is we're committing to you guys.
And what does women in leadership look like for you?
Well, I just sent one to speak at a national conference. Yeah, I want to empower everyone to find and follow Jesus.
Yeah, good.
In whatever way that looks like.
Good. Okay. Well, you guys sent some really hard questions. You are a hard group, but I think the questions were really good questions. And so I'm just going to ask if you two want to go ahead and sit back down. And I'm going to ask Ed if you'll get prepared in a moment to come up and close. And I'm going to do the pre-close before Ed closes. Is that all right? As the shepherds processed this, we had to work through what's important and what's essential. Now, I don't know if you have ever thought those kinds of things. There are 3 layers. Actually, we're going through a little study right now on about doctrine, about what you believe. And there are those things that are essential for us to believe, and those things that are important for us to believe. And then there are those personal beliefs. And I think the same thing is true when it comes to what we want in the next person to lead this congregation. We all have our personal preferences. Some of you have been dying for 20 years for a guy with hair. And that was a personal preference, but you did not consider that important or essential. And I appreciate that, okay? You understand what I'm trying to say. But then there are those important pieces, but we had to look at what are the essential pieces. That these are deal breaker pieces. And one of those is vision, the ability to lead us into a preferred future. One of those is the capacity to galvanize people, to motivate people, to gather people together and get them moving in a direction and create inertia. I can go long. I'm not going to go through all that. I'm just going to tell you, 2 of those pieces that are critical for us are character and chemistry. Chemistry is how does he get along with the staff? How does he get along with the shepherds? And does he make them better, or does he drain them? And it's really hard to know that about somebody that you don't know. Does that make sense? It's really hard to know that about somebody you don't know. The same thing is true about character. The easiest thing in a hire is to determine whether or not they're competent. The easiest thing in a hire is I listen to Matt sing and I say, oh, he can be our worship guy because he can sing. I can measure, but I need to know his character and I need to know his competency. And the advantage we have with Tyler is he hit all of the essentials. Didn't hit all the importance. He hit all the essentials. And he had the character piece. And that because we've seen him and been with him and know him for 9 years. And I think for us, that was the turning point. It was fascinating in our shepherd's meeting. We were discussing this, and it became a question of his age. Well, not his age, just anybody's age. And we realized that what had happened was everybody in the room had always been led by somebody older than them. And that's just what they were looking for because that's what they had always known. And so we had to think through, can we be led by someone? Can we respect someone who's younger? And I think that's a critical question for you. But it's more about you than it is about the candidate. I hope that makes sense. So with those kinds of things going on week after week after week after week after week, we came to the conclusion that our best way to meet our needs here was already with somebody that we already knew, and somebody that knew us. One last piece to that, and I've talked about this before, but I've got to come back to it. This church is really unique. That's both good and bad, but it's really unique. And we are really unique in our location, for example. I mean, who would build a church building on the back end of a dead-end street on the wrong side of town? And it was somebody who understood God can still be there. That's pretty unique. God can find us there. But then when we started this digital stuff, and it has just gone, we just spoke at a conference, and these people have this glazed look as we're talking about a church that has digital missionaries and a church that has microsites. I mean, we have a language that other churches just don't even know, that is core to us. And we didn't even get there, didn't even get into the fact that we make movies. I mean, that's a whole nother piece of this. Very unique. And so it's really helpful to have somebody that understands our uniqueness rather than try to find somebody and catch them with it. I hope that makes sense to you. All right? Ed, why don't you come close this thing out, please? And clean up my mess when you...
There are things that we know because we're here every day, because we help make decisions and things like that you guys wouldn't necessarily know. I'd like to share a little bit of that with you. The first one is, this might sound like it's off topic, and I promise I'll get back in there, but my youngest son just moved to Vincennes, Indiana a week ago. He got a job there, and so we were helping move him in, and we were having a real hard time finding an apartment for him. So finally, through several other people, got connected to this guy by the name of Dan. And last weekend, when we were moving my son in, I met Dan, and I told him where I worked. And he said, oh, I know something about First Capital. There was a guy who came over a year or so ago and led us in a seminar about technology and the digital world and stuff. And I said, oh yeah, that'd be Tyler. And he said, yeah, that was his name. And what he didn't know, and what you guys wouldn't know, was about 6 months before then, I was over at a church in Washington, Indiana, where Dan happens to be an elder, and they had about 100 chairs sitting there that they weren't using any longer, and we had need here for about 100 chairs, so I bartered Tyler's time without even asking him, and I said, tell you what, I will trade Tyler, a day with Tyler, for those 100 chairs, and he did it. They're sitting over there. They're great chairs. Here's the thing. We have Tyler here who is really, really good at a lot of things. Yeah, he can talk about tech, and he can talk about digital pieces, and he can do all those kinds of things. And he does it, and we don't even know that he's doing that. Were you guys aware that he's talked through the COVID time to 72 different churches to help them get online so that they could do the same kinds of things that we've been able to do in their communities and with their people? 72 churches he's worked with over the last year and a half. That's not just local, that's across the nation. You're probably not aware that he's been on national podcasts, that he's done those kinds of things across the nation. You're probably not aware that he spoke probably 2 months ago at the Spire conference down in Nashville. That used to be called the North American Christian Convention and typically runs 4,000 to 6,000 to 8,000 people. Tyler did that. He spoke about his ministry here and the things that we do here. He been a great representative for us. And he's able to do that because everything he does well. You will not see Tyler ever put his hands to anything that's not done well, which really bodes well for his possible position as lead minister here. It also means you're probably going to hang on to your seat because we're going to take off. When he gets his mind set on something, we're going to move forward, and we might move pretty fast. So 5 years ago when I came, one of the things that Randy talked to me about was he said, so we're gonna make this higher. We're gonna bring back this guy by the name of Tyler. I hadn't met Tyler. He wasn't here when I'd actually interviewed. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What's he gonna do? Because I knew that he was the former worship person. And Randy said, well, I'm not really sure yet what he's gonna do, but we're gonna bring him back because he's really good at what he does. And I said, Randy, that's a mistake. You need to know that's just not gonna work. I know these worship guys. I have a son that's a worship guy. I know these worship guys. They're not gonna get along. It's not gonna work. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Not only about Tyler, but about Matt and their ability to get along and work together and make this thing really go well. So I wanted you to know that he is nationally known for the things that he does here and with us. And I want you to know that the reason why we hear so much good things about Church Anywhere and so many different things that are happening in our region and in our area through Church Anywhere and through digital ministries is because Tyler's really good at it, and whatever he puts his hands to, it's gonna work. And we've heard a lot about that, and I think that just says that he's good at what he does. He's always good at what he does. I'm looking forward to working with him. I'm looking forward to seeing where First Capital goes. I'm looking forward to Randy sticking around for a while longer too. So I don't want you to hear that this is all about Randy's being out of here and Tyler's moving in, because the way I look at it, our leadership team isn't going to change for a while. It's going to be the same 3 people in the room making the same kinds of decisions. We're just going to shuffle some seats around, but everything else is going to be pretty similar. So I hope we've been able to answer some questions. I hope you've been able to get a little bit better look at who Tyler and Sarah are. I hope you've been able to think through where God wants to take First Capital over the next couple of years, the next 5 or 10 years, because I think he has something really good in mind for us. We just have to figure out what it is, and we have to be led there. So thank you for your time coming this evening. God bless your week. Hope you have a great week and a great Thanksgiving. You're dismissed.